President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Your Excellency Anthony Aquinas Carmona and Mrs. Carmona, Chief Justice Archie and Mrs. Archie, the Mayor of the City of Port of Spain, members of the clergy, Mrs. Manning and the entire Manning extended family, distinguished heads of state and governments from the region, distinguished invited guests, fellow citizens, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to acknowledge my wife, Sharon Rowley, and on behalf of our family, on this day of celebration, we extend our deepest condolences to the Manning family and join with the rest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago in acknowledging one of our finest sons. As I pay tribute today to Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning, a man that I first met in 1974. And as I look back on the history of our contact, there's so much confluence that I wonder if it was just all accidental or just meant to be. We're both geologists. We both lived in Irving Hall. And I first met him the year I joined the PNM. But as I join in this celebration today to celebrate this distinguished life, in my capacity as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, that sounds like duty. But I prefer to think of him as that citizen who is yet another reflection of what happens over time. Students of history will tell you that invariably leaders arise at moments of turmoil. And history as a graph is not a straight line, climbing or falling. It usually is a graph of peaks and troughs. And invariably, it is at times when there's a trough that a great leader appears. Dr. Williams appeared at the time of the oppression of colonialism. George Chambers was there in a moment of great sadness similar to this, when Dr. Williams passed away. And Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning appeared after 1970, when he could have chosen a life of great reward to himself and his family, because in those days, a young geologist, highly qualified, entering a job at the oil refinery, could have lived a bright and prosperous life. But as a very young man, he gave up that, and that was an indication to us that this was a man who was prepared to give. And he went on to become a servant, a junior servant in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And in the political arena, there's something that is always in great and overwhelming supply, and that is advice. And this is a man who gave me 2 pieces of advice. But advice is only as good as the time in which it is given. He first advised me not to enter politics, because in moments of doubt, he felt that he might have made a mistake, but destiny would take care of that. But then later on, the same man would say to the same me, on his journey to serve this country and to get those who can contribute to serve with him, he said to me, but you have to run for elections. You can't be a deputy leader and not run. You've been in the forefront of the campaign. And then I felt guilty, because in 1991, this is a man who since 1987 was sure that we had to win in 1991. And then there are those who believe that our relationship and the high point of his career is a battle we had in 2008. But between 1974 and 2016, there were a lot of years, a lot of peaks, and a lot of troughs. And as we celebrate his life today and reflect on who he was, and I'm to speak on the behalf of all those who I represent in the PNM and in the country, I can tell you there was so much more to this man, so much more that I myself could never emulate. I remember as the opposition leader, he and I went to Tobago, I the Tobagonian, and he the leader, looking to a bright future. And office holders in Tobago extended to him a grievous insult as the office holder that he turned up in Tobago as. And I, as Tobagonian, I was incensed, and I wanted to retaliate. And he said to me, "Rowley, forget it." And I said, "How could I forget that?" And he said, "No insult taken, none given." And I said, "You're letting them off the hook." And he repeated it. "No insult taken, none given." There are many people who believe that he was stubborn, and yes, he was, but there was virtue in that stubbornness. But if you knew where to approach him from, that stubbornness could be made to disappear, because he was a man like that. I remember as he took full charge of his cabinet and he tried to make us be like him, he said to us in the cabinet that ministers of government should not take holidays. And I opposed that position. I said to him, part of the terms of my engagement is I'm allowed and I must have a month's holiday, and I will take it. And those who know him very well would know when he's confronted like that, he responds by pouting. A pout swells up. And after, I went to him and I said, "Chief, I'm raising a family. I'm raising children. And I have a little daughter. Every time I pick up a towel and I head to the bathroom, she will run and hold on to my leg and say, 'Daddy, you're going out.' And it breaks my heart. Once in a while, I'm able to say to her, 'No, I'm going to bed.' And you see that? 11 months of the year, I don't see my children. And 1 month of the year in August, that's the only time I wake up with them, spend the day with them, and go to bed with them. And I'm not giving that up." I said, "Rowley, all right." And we took our holidays. He never took any. And then another time, he decreed that ministers of government must represent the dignity of the office. And how do you do that? PNM ministers must wear the black suit and a tie at all times. I said, "Chief, I bought a lot of gray suits. I even have a brown suit. And how I choose my suits is how I feel when I wake up in the morning. Permit me the freedom to wear what I feel." And he pouted and he left, and I've been wearing all kinds of suits ever since. He was a man who, after 35 years of serving with him in public life, I have never heard him speak of anything which he wanted for himself. It was always something, and sometimes something outrageous for Trinidad and Tobago. And it was that which caused him today to be acknowledged as the person who put us into business in LNG, into education at UTT, and who last, in this week, I sat proudly as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and listened to every regional head sat around a table in Georgetown paying what I consider to be a genuine tribute to a citizen of which we can all be proud. He had a tremendous sense of humor, and sometimes you didn't know when he was joking or when he was deadly serious. But if you had lived with him the way I did, you would know. In 1987, he and I went in the teeth of the gale of the NAR domination of the political landscape. We went to Sumat Gardens to conduct a political meeting one Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. Picture the place, picture the time, picture 2 P&M leaders. And we sat in this house. It must have been the only house in the area that would allow us to set up our PA system in front of them. And we sat there and waited for the people to come to this 3 o'clock meeting. And an hour passed and no one came. Not a single soul. So we were having a drink with the householder, and then he turned to me and said, "Rowley, start." And I said, "Start what?" He said, "Start the meeting." I said, "But there's nobody there." But I noticed he wasn't laughing. So I got up and I went to the microphone and I spoke for an hour to no one. And then I thought that was the end of it, because I thought he had played a joke on me. So I came back into the house and I sat down, and he walked to the microphone and he spoke for 45 minutes. And then I knew that was a man who was never asked you to do what he wouldn't do himself. And when he came in, I said, "What was all this about?" He said, "They didn't come, but they're home in the house listening." And those are the kinds of memories that I would cherish. And I would want this nation, on this occasion, to treat today as a day of celebration. And as we bury our dead, let us be a grateful nation, knowing that he was a man who made public service in this country honorable. And who must have heard the question that John Kennedy asked his nation: "Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." Patrick Manning asked that question and answered it. So today, we know that he was a Christian. We know that he had an abiding faith in God. So we must know that even up to his last breath, he would have been confident in the text of the scripture, knowing that the promise was, "Lo, I will be with you always. I will be with you always, even unto the ends of the earth." May you rest in peace.